coffee catastrophe. The blare of Maya's alarm ripped through the pre-dawn quiet, a jarring counterpoint to the gentle rain pattering against her window. 5:15 a.m. She was late. Again. A groan escaped her lips as she fumbled for the snooze button, knowing full well hitting it was a fool's errand. The guilt was a far more effective alarm than any electronic device. Throwing back the covers, she navigated the familiar obstacle course of her tiny apartment, a stack of yoga mats precariously balanced on a chair, a mountain of laundry threatening to spill from its basket. A quick shower, a smear of lipstick, and she was out the door, grabbing a banana and her flight attendant's kit bag in one swift motion. The airport was a hive of organized chaos, a symphony of rolling suitcases and hurried footsteps. Maya dodged a businessman glued to his phone and a gaggle of teenagers chattering excitedly about their spring break destination. She made it to the gate just as boarding commenced for Flight 327 to Denver. Relief washed over her, quickly replaced by the familiar pre-flight jitters. The passengers filed in, a tapestry of humanity, families with squirming toddlers, weary travelers with dark circles under their eyes, and Arthur Thompson, a man who looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. He settled into his aisle seat with a grunt, his face a mask of disapproval. Maya made a mental note to offer him extra peanuts. The beverage service began smoothly enough. Orange juice, water, coffee, the usual suspects. Maya expertly navigated the aisle, her movements practiced and efficient. Then, disaster struck. As she reached Mr. Thompson, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The coffee pot lurched in her hand, and a scalding stream of dark liquid cascaded over his lap. "Ark!" Mr. Thompson roared, leaping to his feet. The coffee stained his beige trousers a horrifying shade of brown. "Are you blind, young woman? What do you think you're doing?" Maya's face flushed crimson. "Oh my God, sir, I am so incredibly sorry," she stammered, grabbing a handful of napkins. "Let me help you clean that up." "Clean it up," he bellowed, his voice rising above the hum of the engines. "This is ruined. This is a brand new pair of trousers." He gestured wildly at the spreading stain, his face contorted with rage. Passengers craned their necks, whispering amongst themselves. Maya frantically dabbed at the mess, her apologies tumbling over each other. "I'll get you some club soda, sir. And I'll file a report. The airline will reimburse you, I promise." "Reimburse me," he scoffed. "That's not the point. This is about respect. About paying attention to what you're doing." He glared at her, his eyes like chips of flint. "You young people today, you're all so careless. No regard for anyone else." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes. She knew he was right, at least partially. She had been rushing, distracted by her tardiness. But his harsh words stung nonetheless. She wanted to explain, to apologize properly, but the words caught in her throat. She just kept dabbing, feeling the weight of his anger pressing down on her. The aroma of coffee, now mingled with the scent of humiliation, filled the air. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, requesting calm and assuring passengers that the turbulence had passed. But the turbulence in Maya's world was just beginning. The complaint. The summons to Ms. Jenkins' office lacked the grace of a whisper, echoing through the terminal like a malfunctioning PA system. Maya's name, called out across the busy concourse, bounced off the shimmering surfaces, lodging itself like a cold stone in her gut. Behind her immaculate desk sat Ms. Jenkins, whose professional demeanor rarely warmed her gaze. A state-of-the-art laptop and a solitary, unmarked file formed the desk's stark landscape. Maya's stomach clenched, the folder likely held her professional demise. "Rodriguez, have a seat." Her superior's tone was curt, dispensing with the usual formalities. Maya settled gingerly onto the chair, dampening the leather. The air felt thick, still, and she felt a film of sweat break out on her skin. Arthur Thompson, Flight 412 to Phoenix. Does that name resonate? Ms. Jenkins' voice was silken, yet possessed an underlying steel that could cut glass. Maya's breath hitched. "Yes, I accidentally spilled coffee on him." The explanation rushed out, a garbled admission. A perfectly arched brow rose on Ms. Jenkins' face. Spilled coffee? Rodriguez, this isn't a schoolyard incident. We've received a formal complaint. Mr. Thompson cites considerable distress, damage to his belongings, and a profound lack of service etiquette. Heat flared on Maya's cheeks. She recalled the stinging temperature, the passenger's sharp cry of surprise, her own flustered apologies. The memory, replayed now, ballooned into a monumental catastrophe. I apologized repeatedly, Ms. Jenkins. I offered compensation for the dry cleaning. It was unintentional, truly, intent holds no sway, Rodriguez. Passenger experience reigns supreme. Our mission is to provide smooth, delightful journeys, not baptize clients in hot beverages. Ms. Jenkins tapped the pristine file with a meticulously painted nail. This casts a long shadow on the airline's reputation, our commitment to excellence. Is that clear? Maya nodded, her throat constricted. All too clear. She was one clumsy move away from being grounded. This constitutes a warning, Rodriguez. A formal reprimand, understand? Any repetition of this type of incident and we will be forced to reconsider your continued employment. Ms. Jenkins' eyes were unwavering, holding Maya captive. Exceptional customer care is non-negotiable. It's the foundation upon which we stand. Smile, be proactive, anticipate needs. And for goodness sake, exercise caution with hot drinks. The meeting concluded with a dismissal that felt like a slap. Maya emerged from the office, the weight of Ms. Jenkins' pronouncements heavy on her shoulders. The bustling terminal, once a familiar backdrop, now seemed a perilous minefield of critical eyes and latent hazards. She leaned against a nearby column, a tight band around her chest. How could she be so inept? So thoughtless? She took pride in her efficiency, her compassion. She genuinely enjoyed making passengers happy. Now, she was just a liability, a walking, talking spill hazard. Her gaze roamed the concourse, pausing on a group of children gathered near a departure gate, their faces gleaming with anticipation. A pang of sadness resonated within her. She longed to be a source of delight, not a cause for complaint. She squared her shoulders, drew in a deep breath, and summoned a smile. She wouldn't allow a single misstep to define her. She would exercise greater caution, demonstrate more attentiveness. She would prove her value. But as she headed back to her station, a tiny seed of rebellion took root. Was Mr. Thompson truly so aggrieved? Or was he merely a disagreeable curmudgeon seeking a target for his discontent? Avoiding art. The clang of the meal service startled Maya, sending a jolt through her. She shrank further into her seat, feigning fascination with the emergency procedures card. The flight attendant's approach was a slow-motion dread. 2 rows ahead sat Mr. Thompson. Her insides twisted. Chicken or pasta, dear, the attendant's voice boomed. Pasta, Maya whispered, eyes fixed on the flimsy plastic of her cutlery pack. Anything to avoid facing the direction of her recent crime. Even the aroma of institutional pasta felt like an accusation. A quick, furtive peek after the cart passed revealed Mr. Thompson, locked in a forward stare, his jaw a rigid line. His untouched meal sat before him like a testament to her clumsiness. Guilt gnawed. An apology was essential, yet the words were lodged, a lump in her throat. The cabin light softened, suggesting slumber. Sleep, however, felt light years away. Each whir of the plane, each rustle and cough, amplified her inner turmoil. The coffee catastrophe replayed in her mind, each iteration more mortifying than the last. Another glance confirmed his stillness. The overhead light sculpted harsh angles on his face, deepening the creases around his eyes. He appeared isolated. In her mind, Maya rehearsed a scene, a tap on his shoulder, a rush of words. Mr. Thompson, I'm incredibly sorry. It was a fluke. I'm usually so coordinated, believe me. Too frantic. A revised scenario, Mr. Thompson, the coffee. I feel awful. Is there anything I can get you? A pillow? A magazine? Another, never mind. Infinitely worse. Every mental script felt inadequate, steeped in self-pity. Shame weighed heavily on her, a palpable pressure on her chest. She flipped through the airline magazine, seeking refuge in its pages, but the gleaming smiles and idyllic landscapes only sharpened the focus on her present humiliation. Was he still seething? Repulsed, perhaps? She couldn't fault him. Scalded by lukewarm coffee on a cross-country flight, who does that? Another sidelong look. He tentatively forked a bite of pasta, but his expression remained unreadable, a stoic mask of endurance. Maybe he hadn't even registered the culprit. Maybe such misfortunes were commonplace for him. A fleeting sense of hope flickered, quickly extinguished by the memory of his wince as the coffee splashed. The drone of the engines became a monotonous dirge, a constant soundtrack to her failure. She had aimed for graciousness, for helpfulness, for good. Instead, she'd assaulted a veteran with airline coffee. With a silent groan, she pressed her face into her hands. Avoiding atonement, it seemed, was a difficult task indeed. Unexpected kindness. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked on again, its red glow a frantic pulse in the cabin's dim light. Maya gripped the armrests, knuckles white. Outside, the storm raged unseen, but its fury was palpable in the way the plane shuddered and groaned. Coffee sloshed precariously in her cup, threatening another disaster. She focused on keeping it steady, a pathetic attempt to maintain control in the face of the turbulent chaos. Suddenly, a child's wail pierced through the drone of the engines and the muffled gasps of the other passengers. It was a small sound, full of pure, unadulterated fear, rising above the metallic symphony of stress. Maya risked a glance. A little girl, no older than 6, was huddled in the seat across the aisle, tears streaming down her face. Her mother, looking equally pale, was attempting to soothe her, but her own voice trembled with anxiety. The plane lurched violently, throwing Maya forward against her seatbelt. The little girl screamed. That's when Mr. Thompson moved. He hadn't said a word since they'd boarded, remaining a stoic, granite presence beside her. But now, he leaned across the aisle, his large frame surprisingly agile. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the noise. It wasn't the gruffness Maya expected, but surprisingly gentle. "What's got you so scared?" The girl sniffled, pointing a trembling finger out the window. "The monster! The monster is shaking the plane." Mr. Thompson chuckled, a low, reassuring sound. "There's no monster, kiddo. Just a bit of bumpy air. Think of it like riding a roller coaster. A really, really long roller coaster." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn object. It was a silver dollar, its surface polished smooth with age. "See this? This is my lucky coin. I've been through worse than this with this little guy. Hold it tight, and it'll keep the monsters away." He placed the coin in the girl's hand, closing her small fingers around it. The girl stared at the coin, her sobs gradually subsiding. "My grandpa gave it to me," Mr. Thompson continued, his voice softer now. "Said it always brought him home safe. And it always did." The girl clutched the coin tightly. Her breathing slowed, her wide eyes fixed on Mr. Thompson's face. Even her mother seemed to relax, a flicker of gratitude in her weary eyes. The turbulence continued, but the girl no longer screamed. She sat quietly, her small hand gripping the silver dollar, her gaze occasionally darting towards Mr. Thompson. He settled back into his seat, his face impassive once more. The moment of unexpected tenderness seemed to have vanished as quickly as it appeared. Maya watched him, a knot of curiosity tightening in her stomach. This wasn't the grumpy, unapproachable man she thought she knew. This was someone else entirely. Someone capable of profound kindness, someone who understood the language of fear and knew how to offer comfort. Who was Arthur Thompson, really? And what other secrets did he hold? A glimmer of honor. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked off, and the captain's voice, crackling slightly, announced that the turbulence had passed. A collective sigh swept through the cabin, followed by the rustling of magazines and the tentative unbuckling of belts. Maya, still flushed from her near-disastrous coffee incident, felt a wave of relief wash over her. She peeked sideways at Mr. Thompson, expecting to see lingering annoyance, but his expression was surprisingly calm. He was turned towards the young mother across the aisle, who was struggling to soothe her crying child. "Here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice a low rumble, "try this." He reached into his worn leather bag and pulled out a small, plush bear. Its fur was matted, and one of its button eyes was missing, but it looked undeniably loved. The mother's face lit up with surprised gratitude. "Oh, sir, I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," he insisted gently. "My granddaughter outgrew him years ago. Might bring your little one some comfort." The child, momentarily distracted by the bear, stopped crying and reached for it with chubby fingers. Maya watched, a warmth spreading through her chest. This gruff, solitary man possessed a surprising capacity for kindness. He wasn't the ogre she'd initially pegged him to be. As Mr. Thompson settled back into his seat, adjusting his jacket, Maya noticed something glinting beneath the lapel. A small, faded medal, pinned to the inside lining. It was partially obscured by the fabric, but she could make out a starburst shape and a ribbon of what looked like faded blue and gold. It wasn't ostentatious, wasn't meant to be seen, but it was there, a silent testament to something significant. Curiosity gnawed at her. What was it for? A bravery award? A service medal? The muted colors and hidden placement suggested it was something deeply personal, a memory he chose to keep close but not display. She wanted to ask, to know the story behind it, but hesitated. It felt intrusive, like prying into a part of his life he clearly preferred to keep private. Still, the image of the medal lingered in her mind, a tiny beacon in the otherwise unremarkable landscape of his appearance. It hinted at a past far richer and more complex than she could have imagined. The rest of the flight passed without incident. Maya tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the medal. She imagined Mr. Thompson as a young man, full of vigor and purpose, perhaps even a hero. The contrast between that image and the weary, withdrawn man beside her was stark and unsettling. As the plane began its descent, Maya felt a sense of unease settle over her. The coffee incident had been a mistake, a clumsy accident. But now, looking at Mr. Thompson, she realized she'd made another, perhaps more profound, error, a snap judgment based on appearances. The plane touched down smoothly, and the passengers began gathering their belongings. Mr. Thompson retrieved his bag from the overhead compartment and turned to Maya. "Thank you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "For being understanding." Maya, flustered, stammered, "It was my fault, sir. I'm so sorry about the coffee." He gave a curt nod, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Accidents happen." Then, with a final glance, he stepped into the aisle and disappeared into the throng of departing passengers. Maya watched him go, the image of the hidden medal burned into her memory. A glimmer of honor, concealed beneath layers of weariness and reserve. A reminder that everyone, even the grumpiest of strangers, has a story worth knowing. And a reminder, too, that she needed to be more careful about the stories she told herself. An apology offered. Maya traced the rim of her lukewarm tea, the ceramic ruff against her fingertip. The diner was emptier now, the lunch rush a faded memory. Arthur Thompson sat at the same booth as before, newspaper spread wide, obscuring most of his face. He hadn't touched his food. She'd rehearsed her apology a dozen times, each version feeling more inadequate than the last. This wasn't just about spilled coffee, it was about respect, about righting a wrong. She took a deep breath, the scent of frying bacon clinging to the air, and pushed herself to her feet. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the linoleum. He didn't look up as she approached. The newspaper rustled as she stopped beside his table. "Mr. Thompson," she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He lowered the paper slowly, revealing eyes that looked older than his face, etched with a weariness that made her stomach clench. "Yes?" Maya's carefully constructed apology crumbled in her mind. I wanted to apologize," she stammered, her cheeks burning. "For spilling the coffee on you. It was completely my fault." I wasn't paying attention, and I was rushing, Anne. I'm really, really sorry. She felt the familiar sting of tears behind her eyes. I ruined your shirt. He studied her face for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. A fly buzzed lazily near the window, the only sound in the diner. Finally, he sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. Accepted, he said, his voice gruff but lacking the sharp edge from before. He folded the newspaper meticulously, aligning the edges with precision. It was an accident. No harm done. But harm was done, Maya thought. She disrespected him, not just by ruining his shirt, but by being careless. I can pay for the dry cleaning, she offered, her voice stronger now. Or buy you a new shirt. Whatever you want. He shook his head, a flicker of something that might have been amusement crossing his lips. That's not necessary. The stain will probably come out. Besides, he added, his gaze drifting towards the window, it's an old shirt. Seen better days, like myself. Maya hesitated. She sensed a deeper story there, hidden beneath the surface. A story she didn't have the right to ask about. Are you okay? She ventured, instantly regretting her boldness. He looked back at her, his eyes narrowed slightly. Okay enough, he replied, his voice flat. I'm heading home. Been away too long. He paused, a strange vulnerability in his gaze. Sometimes, coming home is harder than leaving. He stood up, his movement stiff and deliberate. He placed a few crumpled bills on the table, barely enough to cover the untouched breakfast. Thank you for accepting my apology, Maya said, watching him. He nodded curtly, then turned and walked towards the door, his silhouette framed against the bright sunlight. The bell above the door jingled softly as he left, leaving Maya alone with her tea and a lingering sense of unease. Something about Arthur Thompson's departure felt final. The sergeant's story. The clatter of the beverage cart was a welcome distraction. Maya navigated the aisle, her cheeks flushed, offering ginger ale and lukewarm coffee with an overly bright smile. Careful, it's hot, she chirped, a little too late as a drop splashed onto Mrs. Henderson's floral dress. Oh, I am so sorry. Maya squeaked, dabbing at the stain with a handful of napkins. Mrs. Henderson, thankfully, just patted Maya's hand and said, no harm done, dear. Further down the aisle, two men in business suits were deep in conversation. Maya offered them coffee. Just black, one said, barely glancing at her. As she poured, she overheard snippets of their talk. Unbelievable courage. Sergeant Thompson. Medal of Honor. Maya's hand faltered, a tremor running through her. She focused on filling the cup, trying not to spill. Sergeant Thompson? The name pricked at her memory. Local hero. Never talks about it. Lived right here in Havenwood. Havenwood. The town where Mr. Thompson, the grumpy old man she'd scolded with coffee, lived. The pieces clicked together with the force of a closing trap. The stooped shoulders, the quiet dignity, the haunted look in his eyes, it wasn't just age or grumpiness. It was something else. Something bigger. She finished pouring and hurried away, her face burning with a different kind of heat now, a heat of shame and a dawning sense of respect. She glanced back at Mr. Thompson. He was staring out the window, his face an unreadable mask. The sunlight caught the sharp angles of his profile, etching lines of hardship and resilience onto his skin. Sergeant Thompson. A hero. And she had spilled coffee on him. The irony was almost too much to bear. She, who aspired to be brave and helpful, had managed to inflict pain, however minor, on someone who had risked his life for his country. Guilt gnawed at her. She remembered his quiet acceptance after the coffee incident, his lack of complaint. Had he been hiding his discomfort, his pain, behind that stoic facade? Had she added to his burdens? She pictured the medal, gleaming gold, a symbol of extraordinary valor. And then she pictured herself, flustered and apologetic, wielding a coffee pot like a weapon of mass destruction. Maya retreated to the galley, her stomach churning. She leaned against the cool metal counter, trying to steady her breathing. This changed everything. It wasn't just about burnt skin and an awkward apology anymore. It was about respect. About understanding. About making amends, not just for the coffee, but for her own ignorance and clumsiness. Making amends. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard during her lunch break. Guilt gnawed at her, a persistent ache that no amount of spicy tuna roll could soothe. Sergeant Thompson. Arthur Thompson. She typed the name into the search bar, adding local heroes on a whim. The results were astounding. News articles, blog posts, even a blurry video from some local parade, all painted a picture of a man far removed from the grumpy, coffee-soaked figure she'd encountered that morning. Bronze Star recipient. Saved 3 fellow soldiers during an ambush in Kandahar. Decorated for valor. The words swam before her eyes, each one a tiny hammer blow to her already fragile self-esteem. He'd fought for his country. He'd risked his life for others. And she'd scalded him with lukewarm coffee. Her initial embarrassment morphed into something deeper, a profound sense of shame. She closed her eyes, picturing his face, the lines etched deep around his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped slightly. They weren't signs of grumpiness, she realized, but of weariness, of burdens carried. Maya snatched a notepad and pen from her overflowing tote bag. The aroma of stale coffee and forgotten granola bars wafted up as she rummaged. She needed to apologize. Not with a mumbled sorry as she'd done earlier, but with a heartfelt expression of her regret and admiration. The first few attempts ended crumpled in the trash. Too formal. Too gushing. Too Maya. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the words began to flow. She wrote about her clumsiness, her tendency to rush, but also about her deep respect for service and sacrifice. She acknowledged his bravery, admitted her mistake, and sincerely apologized for the pain and inconvenience she'd caused. She ended by wishing him a day filled with peace and quiet, the kind of peace she imagined he'd earned 1,000 times over. The bell above the bakery door chimed, signaling the end of her break. She reread the letter, her stomach doing a nervous flip. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Back at Brew and Bites, Maya felt a surge of determination. She couldn't just leave it at the letter. She needed to offer something more, a small token to demonstrate the depth of her remorse. She remembered Arthur's obvious love for coffee, the way he'd gripped the cup like a lifeline. She darted across the street to the Daily Grind, a small, independent coffee shop renowned for its exotic blends. After a quick consultation with the barista, she selected a small bag of Ethiopian yirgacheffe, its aroma rich and intoxicating. With the letter and the coffee clutched in her hand, Maya returned to Brew and Bites. Arthur's usual seat by the window was empty. Relief washed over her, followed by a fresh wave of anxiety. She carefully placed the letter and the small bag of coffee on the table, hoping he would understand. She pictured him finding it, reading it, maybe even cracking a small smile. As she wiped down the counter, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was only beginning to make amends. A new understanding. The chime releasing them from airborne captivity echoed like a gunshot. Passengers, cramped and weary, began edging toward freedom. Maya, her pulse a frantic drum solo against her ribs, meticulously gathered forgotten comforts and newsprint casualties of the journey. Each discarded item, a silent offering of regret. Then she saw him. Mr. Thompson. He lingered near the front, yielding to the surge of exiting travelers. Unhurried. A wave of unexpected relief washed over her, momentarily eclipsing her apprehension. He hadn't vanished in a blaze of indignation. As Maya reached for a glossy magazine beside his seat, he raised a hand. Miss Rodriguez. She stilled, her fingers hovering. Yes, Mr. Thompson. Her voice, betraying her unease, emerged as a mere breath. He held aloft the slightly creased letter she'd secreted into his jacket pocket. His expression held no trace of simmering anger, instead, a gentler cast had settled upon his features. The rigid lines bracketing his mouth seemed to have softened. I wanted to, thank you, he murmured, his voice a deep resonance barely audible above the disembarkation clamor. Maya blinked, caught off guard. "Thank me." "For the letter." "For the apology." He paused, his gaze tracing the lines of the paper before returning to her. It resonated deeply. Warmth bloomed across Maya's cheeks. I felt awful, Mr. Thompson. It was a clumsy mishap, and you didn't deserve that. Especially, given your background." He gave a slight nod. "How did you discover that?" "I researched you," she confessed, her blush intensifying. "After the coffee incident. I needed context. I needed to understand the man I wronged." He sighed, the sound laced with fatigue. "Understanding seems a luxury these days. I learned about your service, Mr. Thompson. Your actions, remarkable." Genuine admiration surged, eclipsing the previous guilt and trepidation. "I'm truly sorry for my carelessness." He studied her intently, his blue eyes sharp and perceptive. "Frankly, Miss Rodriguez, I've been feeling overlooked lately. Almost invisible. Like a specter fading into a world that's moved on." Maya's heart winced. She knew that sensation of being unseen, that quiet erosion of self-worth, even if their origins differed vastly. And then, he continued, his voice barely above a breath, "A young woman, to whom I likely displayed unwarranted curtness, takes the time to acknowledge my existence. To recognize everything." He tapped the letter. It was unexpectedly touching. "I see you, Mr. Thompson," Maya blurted, the words escaping before she could restrain them. "And I'm grateful for your service. Genuinely." A faint smile grazed his lips. "Thank you, Miss Rodriguez. It means more than you know." He paused. "Perhaps we both jumped to conclusions." "Perhaps," she echoed, mirroring his smile. A sense of liberation unfurled within her, a connection forged from a spilled beverage and a sincere expression of remorse. The queue had noticeably diminished. Mr. Thompson straightened his jacket, his movements composed, yet imbued with a newfound ease. "I must depart. My daughter awaits. Give her my regards," Maya offered. He nodded. As he turned to leave, he halted once more. "And Miss Rodriguez?" "Yes, Mr. Thompson. Don't berate yourself so harshly. Mistakes are universal." A genuine, illuminating smile transformed his face. "It's what follows that reveals our character." With that, he turned and melted into the stream of humanity heading towards the terminal. Maya watched him disappear, a feeling of tranquility settling in her core. The cabin air seemed fresher, lighter. Maybe, just maybe, she had done something right.